I don't really remember how to do this anymore. I'm kind of waiting for muscle memory to kick in, but it's gonna come back to me slow and steady, right? Hi, I'm Sanjana. I used to make videos, 2-3 years ago about books, what I was reading, what I was gonna read, what I've already read. It wasn't the most consistent thing, but it was my coping mechanism in the pandemic. But I guess I did keep my channel even after, life kind of resumed. We're definitely decidedly in the after right now. It was comforting to know that I could always have this outlet. In fact, I've recorded multiple videos, but I just never gotten back into the groove of things. I didn't quite expect to quit it as suddenly as I did, but life gets in the way, work, multiple other stuff. And I've been ruminating a lot about why it was important for me to have this back then, and it's still kind of important for me to hold on to it now, even though I haven't posted anything. I've just realized that I've, missed it, and I do enjoy having that space and time where I get to reflect on books, form opinions on the fly, because this is not a scripted thing ever for me. I've never been able to read off a script. It would have been so much easier. I'm much better at writing, guys. So here I am trying to jumpstart this again, but also being very cognizant of my schedule and the way my life is structured, because there's one thing I cannot promise to you or myself, which is consistency. And I also cannot promise as a limited scope that this will just be about books. I have no idea. In fact, I've changed the name of my channel. It used to be called Lockdown Literary Club, clearly not the lockdown anymore. I've changed it to just my name now. It's not great for SEO, but almost every video posted has profanity in it, so there was never a shot at me monetizing this. Purely just a hobby. And I could have come up with other names for my channel, but it would have just been weeks and weeks of anxious list making, and it just seemed easier and better for my mental stability to keep it simple. We're finding an era where we're taking girl bossing and being on your A game 24/7 down a peg or two. As far as I'm concerned, the perfect 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. routines and the beige aesthetic, thigh gaps, and the perfect clean aesthetic can eat it already, right? But I don't know why we set such impossible standards for ourselves. It's a lot. I am a younger millennial, so of course I like minimalism and like clean girl aesthetic. But to pretend your whole life can be that sanitized is exhausting. So I've kind of given up trying to chase that rigid routine. So sporadic, mismatched, chaotic, obsessive, distracted, overwhelmed, that's definitely more my brand. So this is my corner of the internet. What I'm doing here, hopefully provide something valuable for people listening in, be it book recommendations, white noise in the background as you go about doing your daily chores, or even if you sometimes don't read books. I know it's nice to listen to people or watch people who have similar interests as you on YouTube. That's certainly what I do. Whatever your thing is, whether you stick around or decide I'm not for you and choose to move on, totally your prerogative. Whatever you do, I hope you kind of lead with empathy. So that's it for my introduction. Now let's kind of move on to the meat of the matter. I'm gonna be taking it easy, not to overstretch myself. I do not want 3 hours of footage to edit. I spook easy, and I have a penchant or penchant, however you say it, to overdo it when it comes to books. So I'm just gonna focus on literary releases in April. Why April? I just turned 30 this week. I'm definitely an atheist, but I feel like the universe kind of conspired to Gagne the releases of a bunch of my favorite, most anticipated works in my birthday month. So clearly it's all about me. Why should you care about this? Because I think I have good taste in books. Simple as that. I said the quiet part out loud. Whether it's because I read enough that I can parse out the good ones from the bad ones, or I'm just narcissistic enough to think I get to be the dictator of other people's tastes. What's that quote from Fleabag? Let me look it up. It goes, okay, that's a long quote. We don't need all the lines. It goes, I think I just want someone to tell me how to live my life, Father, because so far I think I've been getting it wrong. And we've all felt that in our bones. That show, brilliant. Anyways, while I can't speak to most things with the inflated confidence men have when they mansplain shit that we already know better than them, there's one thing I can channel my inner man around, and that's books. And I'm happy to be the person that tells people what books to read and occasionally what books to shun. So, watch out, world. I'm in my hot priest era. I am Blair Waldorf, evil dictator of taste. Hear me roar. Cringe. I internally cringed so hard just now. Before we move on to the books, I just wanted to do a quick shout out. Literary scene in Hyderabad, it's been heartwarming and wonderful to watch new book clubs and activities around reading that have cropped up in the city. So many new stores, so many people that meet up and talk about books, and events around books. It's wonderful. And not just books, there's been all other kind of like little creative outlets that have come up, and it's cool. I actually never thought it would happen, but it's nice. So great job, whoever's involved with this. Props. You are doing God's work, because this is my religion, so I appreciate it. Okay, onto the books. I have 4 literary works that I'm really excited about, and then a couple of honorary mentions. Because I'm just talking about books that are still coming out, I tend to be excited about authors I've already read, and this is very niche me, but still stuff you should check out. So the first book we're going to talk about is Just for the Summer by Jimenez. I think that's how you say her name. I should just put a blanket disclaimer in front of every one of my videos. If I butcher your names, it was not intentional. I'm just an impatient person that does not look up how to pronounce names, which is quite rude because I do not like when people mispronounce my name either. I will try and do better in the future. That's all anybody can ever do. This is an author that has consistently knocked it out of the park for me. This book, Just for the Summer, I actually don't know much about. I try to go into books with as little information as possible to not have preconceived notions and be disappointed later. But if it's a tried and tested author like this one, I don't need to be convinced to read the book, right? So I don't need to know what's gonna happen. I could just go for the vibes. My favorite romance of last year is actually by this author. It was called Yours Truly. If you haven't checked it out, you should. I've recommended it to multiple people, and the people that have taken my recommendation and read it have loved it. So it's a great book. I've read 2 books that fall in the same universe as this book is, A Part of Your World and Yours Truly. This is the 3rd book in that series. A lot of authors are doing this, where it's not a direct sequel, but they tend to use secondary or tertiary characters in the book as the main lead in the next book. That's the reason I'm excited for it. If you haven't checked out Yours Truly, you should. Moving on to the second book, we have The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I've read about 9 of Leigh Bardugo's books, and I think 7 of those 9 books are in the same universe, right? There's 3 different series in the Grishaverse universe. There's the Shadow and Bone series, there's the Six of Crows duology, and the King of Scars duology. And there's also a separate book series called the Ninth House series, which is in the dark academia genre, but it's also an urban fantasy, magical realism. It's set in the present day, right? Grishaverse universe is around the Industrial Revolution, whereas the Ninth House series is definitely in present day. 2 different universes. If you're meaning to check out Leigh Bardugo, I would rank at the tippy top the Six of Crows series. Second would be the Ninth House series. So far, it's still an incomplete series. We have books coming up, so. Then I would place the King of Scars duology. Again, there might be more books in that duology. She might put a 3rd book out, not sure. And then at the very bottom is the Shadow and Bone series. I don't particularly care for it, but that's the one that has a TV show for some reason. All that to say that this is an author I keep returning to, mostly chasing the high of the Six of Crows series. I'm hoping that one of her books will again capture the magic of that series again. As far as I know, The Familiar is not connected to any of these books, but she could pull a Sarah J. Maas and connect the Ninth House series to The Familiar. That's a possibility. I don't see it being connected to Grishaverse, but this is a possibility. I wouldn't be totally mad if done right, so I'm okay with it. Getting to The Familiar, I didn't read anything but like the blurb she put out when she announced this book, but the premise does sound interesting. This is historical fiction set in Spain in the era of royal courts and subterfuge and, I don't know, some kind of political machinations. The word Inquisition was mentioned in the back of the book, so I'm guessing that's reference to Spanish Inquisition. That lasted, 300, 400 years? So it's still a big chunk of time. Like the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Age of Discovery, all of that fall under that time frame, right? So who knows when. One thing is I'm not as well versed in Spanish history as I am with like American, British, French, Italian, Indian history. This is probably going to inspire me to do research outside of the book, which I always enjoy, so no complaints there. This is an author, if Ninth House is something to go by, that takes her research pretty seriously, so I don't think there'll be too many historical inaccuracies in there. Oh, I love the cover. I love this cover. We've had way too many books with that blobby color blocking thing that's been going on. Mostly it's been like romance books, but also some contemporary fiction that's been doing this. It's just cover art. Guys, we can do so much better. Like, look at this. This is a trend that I've really enjoyed, where we take old existing paintings and then redesign it as cover art for books, right? It has been a trend. I can think of My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh or Claire Keegan's Small Things Like These. Both of those are paintings as far as I know. There's been more. There's been a ton more. I just can't think of them off the top of my head. I love that. I love that trend. It's wonderful. I think more books should do it. Let me look up what painting this is from. I do not... Okay, so the painting it seems to come from is Elizabeth of France or Elizabeth of Valois, who lived from 1546 to 1568. She was the Queen of Spain and the third wife of Philip II of Spain. Ah, so definitely Spanish Inquisition, right? In fact, Philip II, that tells me exactly which era this was set in. If the painting, the book cover, is period accurate, the historical time frame of the book. Not only is it during the Spanish Inquisition, it's during the golden age of Spain. Under Philip II's rule is when both the Spanish Armadas happened. It is when the Protestant movement was in full swing. Spain was warring with them because Henry VIII wanted to get remarried to Anne Boleyn, which means he defied the Catholic Church because they refused to give him a divorce from Catherine of Aragon, who is a Spanish princess. Right before Philip came to power is also when Columbus discovered America's golden age, definitely golden age of Spain. What else can we know about Elizabeth? Oh, she's the eldest daughter of Henry II of France and Catherine de Medici. I'm obsessed with the Medici. I don't think Catherine's going to crop up in this book. I don't know if Elizabeth or Philip II are in this book, but probably. If you don't know who the Medicis are, but love art, the Renaissance, or history, or Italy, or banking, or want to know how popes and dukes gain power, and who commissions works of artists like Michelangelo, Vasari, Botticelli, Donatello, Brunelleschi, John Bologna, to paint, to sculpt, to build some of their greatest masterpieces, it's the Medici. These guys built a 1 kilometer long private corridor bridge, whatever you want to call it, through a thriving city, Florence, from their old home, which have been converted into offices, to their new palace. A part of the corridor goes over an existing river. It cuts through buildings, it cuts through a church. It's a kilometer long, and they did it so they don't have to interact with the rest of the normies. The Medici definitely fully bought in to the illusions of their grandeur. They really thought they were the chosen people or whatever. I am fascinated by them. At least a good century, European politics and governments and economy was influenced by the Medici. They were a big deal, and I'm obsessed. Now, why am I talking about the Medici? Wow. One whiff of the Renaissance and Baroque period, and I went off on a completely different tangent. If the word vomit I just did about history is even remotely interesting to you, maybe this is a book you should check out. And next, on to the author who features regularly on my TBR, the reigning queen of relatable romance, the creator of perfect book boyfriends, my lord and savior, Miss Emily Henry. I shall read anything and everything Henry ever writes. I pray that she never stops writing. And this is coming from someone who didn't particularly care for her last release, Happy Place, that came out last year. Wasn't really my jam, but still, some of my favorite romances of the last 5 years have been by Henry. She's been one of the most consistently good contemporary romance authors out there for me. Because when I pick up a Henry book, I'm guaranteed certain things, right? A story steeped in empathy, a lead that has agency and personality, great chemistry. It's always going to be like verbal sparring and like delectable banter between the leads. And what else? Oh, a leading man that will ruin all other men for me. The number one reason for my singledom might actually be Emily Henry. We're not lowering our standards. We've done it for eons. Let's not anymore. If you haven't read any Emily Henry books, I would recommend you start with Book Lovers, and from there either read Beach Read or A Million Junes if you like YA romances. It has a little bit of magical realism in it. It's one of her older books, but I do actually like it a little more than most of her recent books. One caveat before you read Henry though, if you are exclusively a romance reader, she might not be your cup of tea. She tends to be light on the grand romantic gestures and the big cliche things. She's rather heavy on introspection and self-discovery. But if you are someone who reads contemporary literature or literary fiction, but also like romance books, then I don't see how you can't like Henry, because she's in the smack center of that Venn diagram between contemporary fiction and romance. Like, you know, that's Henry right there. I am psyched. This comes out towards the end of the month, so if it's good, I will never stop talking about it. Finally, on to the fourth release. Fourth in this list, but probably number one, the most anticipated thing in April. And that is The Department of Tortured Poets by Taylor Allison Swift. Let me preface this by saying I do not think Taylor Swift is the second coming of Shakespeare. I have not completely lost the plot here. But I also don't think I'm stretching it at all when I consider a good portion of what she puts out to be literary works. And this is not just because she's a great lyricist. She is that. She also chooses to tell vivid, well-rounded stories with character arcs, with themes, with protagonists and antagonists, with rising and falling action. You know, her songs contain clear narrative voices, there's perspectives involved, metaphors, sometimes even overarching metaphors, which in poetry is called conceit. It's actually quite interesting that she references books, poems, and literature more often in her songs than other, like, you know, singers and songwriters and artists. The poetic period she actually seems most drawn to, so it's actually the Romantic Poets era, which is especially evident in her albums Folklore and Evermore. Another era she keeps going back to is the post-Gilded Age Prohibition era. Give examples. Listen to songs like Evermore, Champagne Problems, Tolerate It, Clean, Great War, All Too Well, and tell me this is not evocative of literature, because they clearly are. And she's certainly not the only artist that does this, right? We have Florence Welch from Florence and the Machine. We have Hosier, whose work I also consider literature adjacent. And I know I said I would not compare her to Shakespeare, but Shakespeare is considered high art and classics now, right? He definitely was not in his time. He was a popularist artist. His work was consumed by everyday men. He wrote plays and comedies that were for mass consumption. Oh God, I'm gonna get hit. Well, my point being, maybe you try and dismantle the rigidity we have around what we consider good literature. I know that Taylor Swift is really popular right now, and there is something in us, innately in us, that makes us want to hate something that's very, very popular. And I'm not opposed to the detractors. There's a lot of derogatory and sexist comments that are spewed against her, which I feel like I need to defend her against, and I do not want to be defending her. I don't know her. Like, I think it's completely valid to think that she should not be using her private jet that much. And I think it's completely valid to be critical of her being a billionaire, not because she didn't put in the hard work or doesn't deserve it, but because billionaires maybe should not exist. That much wealth disparity does not make sense. Why? Why does anybody need that kind of money? And completely valid to dislike her songs. If that is not your vibe, totally makes sense. I, in fact, do not think her songs are musically that accomplished, right? I personally like her because I'm a lyrics over music girly. That's just always who I've been. Before you come at me and try to explain music to me, which I've had happen in the past, I've taken 6 years of classical flute, I've played in bands and orchestras and recitals, I've done music theory, I've passed multiple exams on this. I do understand music, I adore it. It's important to me, but in a song, lyrics have always just trumped instrumentals for me. That's just a personal taste of mine. I cannot help it. I think what I'm advocating for is that her lyrics be viewed as stories. Give Folklore a listen. It's a great album. It's a great exercise in storytelling. There's a reason a lot of YouTubers who analyze her work tend to be literature and English teachers, and there's a reason for that. That's all I'm saying. The last album was almost entirely from her perspective. I don't think we got a lot of fictionalized stories, which she has done in her other albums, right? She does write narratives from other people's perspective, historical figures, etc. Midnight's wasn't that. Maybe there's one or two exceptions in the track list. I feel like this is going to be a good mix of both just judging by the track list names. It's also going to be a heartbreak album. She does love Lorne better than most other artists, so it's going to be heartbreaking. But I do hope that we do get some fictional stories in here. And finally, we have our two honorary mentions. One is You're Here, Poetry of the Natural World, which is an anthology, a collection of poems that's put together by Limon. That's how you say her name. That's an author I really like. I've read two of her poetry collections. She's really good. While I haven't read poems by most of the contemporary American poets on this list, the reason I'm confident about it is because of the editor or the curator. The other reason I'm curious about it, the topic it's dealing with, which is grappling with the natural world. Again, romantic poets, your Byron, your Wordsworth, your Coleridge, your Emily Dickinson. Who else? Though he's not necessarily considered a romantic era poet, Walt Whitman as well. His greatest work, which is Leaves of Grass, is heavily inspired by the American landscape and geography. So I'm curious what modern poets' take on this was going to be. So that's the reason I'm excited about this collection. Mary Oliver is someone who kind of writes in this genre, and I like it. Last book is Sociopath by Patric. This is nonfiction. She is a clinical psychologist, also either self-diagnosed or diagnosed by other people as a sociopath. Though sociopath is not an officially recognized clinical term anymore, it used to be at one point, but right now a lot of what we consider sociopathic tendencies fall under the umbrella of antisocial personality disorder, which is possibly what she has, but I don't know if she's been diagnosed with it. This is her memoir, and just the premise of it sounds really interesting to me, or challenging as well. I think it might be a little bit of a mindfuck. People with antisocial personality disorder tend to be compulsive liars. They're also very low in empathy, but pretty decent emotional intelligence, and they're good at mimicking emotions and are able to kind of mold themselves to fit the situation. They tend to come off as very charismatic people because they can be whoever you want them to be in that situation. My prediction is that if I empathize with the author, then I'll always question whether this has been framed in a way to garner my sympathies or my empathy, right? But then again, which book isn't actually trying to manipulate you to not agree with the author? So I'm already twisting myself into weird knots trying to understand how I fare in this book. Either way, it sounds interesting. We should get more stories from neurodivergent people. That's my list for now. The other thing I've been debating that I want to do is cocktail reviews, because I've really gotten into mixology, but I'm glad to be back. Hopefully this is something that I can sustain over a longer period of time. Catch you next time. Bye. Panic and introvert. Hi, my doggy. Hi.